Hello Chassos, Jay from Pathfinders Studios. Today's video is going to be a VOD of a stream that I did for a list repair for one of my patrons, which I thought might be really good content for you guys to see how, first and foremost, my coaching sessions normally run. Obviously this one was on the list side of it, not the tactical side of it, but to give you guys a look at how a high-end player views every single unit that they've got and takes into consideration how somebody wants to run their list and how they can plug in certain things to make it more effective and little optimizations that we can make. Obviously, everything that I'm talking about in this video, the patrons said that they wanted to have a very, very competitive list. They had a couple of things that they had as must-have includes, but for the most part, the biggest thing for them was having the greatest percentage chance to win their games. If you have other list ideas and how you like to run it and everything else, please don't let this or anything else that anybody else says for that matter put you off playing the game that you want to play. This is aimed at the top, 1% of lists that you would want to run for winning a GT or a major or something like that. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you get a lot out of it. If you would like to get yourself a coaching session like this one, then head to the Patreon link down in the description and you can find out. All of my patrons get access to not only the coaching services, but they get it at a discount. So head over there, join me as a patron, and not only get some stuff for yourself, but help build up the studio and help us bring out some of the amazing content that we have coming up for this year. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Welcome to everybody. I'm making this as a YouTube video. If you're watching here live, hello. We are just going to go through a little bit of a list repair sort of thing. Now, this is sort of like what I will do for patrons or people that need coaching sort of sessions, just to give you a little bit of a look into what they look like and whatever else. Everything that I'm going to be going through, there was nothing functionally wrong with the list, but this is looking at it through a lens of I want to min-max every little thing that I'm doing and make it into something which is a monster, basically. So let's get into it. Let's build up the list first and foremost. Okay, and let's start rebuilding your list. Now, you chucked it in the list help section, I believe.
I did. I've got it open if you want me to go through it and save time.
That's our HQs, that's them. Then we've got, so we went through that a little bit, but he's got the Cadre Fireblade with the Advanced EM Scrambler, which is designed to basically cause area denial for Deep Strike. It's really good against GSC and demons and that sort of thing, or even in a marine heavy metal when they're going to be using a ton of drop pods and that sort of shit, really sort of keeping them from doing some of the things they want to do. Master the Killing Blow ignores Feel No Pains and wound caps and whatever else on all of his shooting, and also on wound rolls of 6 you get an extra AP 3, so things like your burst cannons and whatever else just become monstrous. Then he's got a Precision Crisis Commander, cyclic, and then you've got a target lock on him and you've got a thermoneutronic projector. 2 breacher squads with nothing attached, 10 crit carnivores, a crisis brick. Now this is a 4-man, and this is burst cannon, cyclic, plasma, iridium and stim injectors on the Shazvro, as well as a shield generator, target locks on everybody else. 2 marker drones, 2 shield drones. Then you've got a stealth suit team with just a marker light following them around. You've got 2 ion tides, multi-tracker, target lock, velocity tracker. And you've got SMS on one and 2 plasmas on the other. Then you've got a Sunshark bomber, you absolute madman, as well as 2 devilfish with nothing else attached to them. So that's the list in its entirety. It comes out to, what was it? Basically 2,000 points?
It was 2,000 points on the dot.
Yeah, okay. So there are quite a few optimizations that I believe that we can make to this. Now, the first thing that stands out to me is specifically in the HQ section. I personally wouldn't put the defensive relics onto the commanders. Now, the reason that I say this is that majority of the time I'm using the commanders in a way that they are untouchable to start with. So if you're having them, with people that are able to target them and shoot them or whatever else, you've probably mispositioned. Now, the one exception to that is when I'm running the thermoneutronic projector, particularly on the Enforcer Commander, it's having the Bagel Hunter plate on him particularly is kind of a force multiplier, because you're taking somebody with a functional 1-up save with the Bagel Hunter plate, a 0-up if they're standing in cover, as well as -1 damage at all times. You're making them a very, very, very hard target to go through. Whereas the Crisis Commander, yes, we've got the Iridium Battlesuit, so he's on a 2-up natively, a 1-up without it, a 0-up in cover, but he doesn't have any sort of damage reduction. So if they hit him with 2 damage weapons, he's taking all of it. And that can be something that they cut through quite quickly. As well as the Crisis Commander is likely going, because of the buff that it gives, wanting to hand it out to your Crisis Brick. I think that you can save a little bit here, because the other thing that stands out to me that you don't have is the redeploy Warlord trait. Now, that is probably the only Warlord trait that in my mind is a mandatory take, because it allows you to reactively play to what your opponent's doing. So if, you know, they deploy in a way that you're not really expecting, or you bait it a little bit, or you realize after your deployment phase, you look down and go, oh crap, like everything I'm doing here, I'm not happy with. I've left this out, which, to be honest, happens to the best of us. You don't have any way to fix that problem. And it also means that you can't bait yourself. And what I mean by this is where, like, I will put all of my Devilfish on the line, knowing that because I'll likely be going Montcar with them, they're just going to pre-game move to wherever I want them to go. But then I will also put something in a position where, like, say when I'm playing with Hammerheads, for example, that I have in my list, I will put one in a position where he knows very, very clearly that that Hammerhead can see everything that he doesn't want me to see, in a deployment position that, if he's smart, he knows that I'm going to take it away. But at the same time, he also knows that if I go first, I'm going to leave it there and I'm just going to run up and I'm going to do whatever I want with, you know, a unit that has the capacity to take a lot of things off the board. So if you've got that, it allows mind games, it allows mistake protection, it allows bad luck protection, it allows to fix things that your opponent does that you couldn't have possibly done anything with, even if you play perfectly. So that's where that Warlord trait, I think, is the only one that in my mind is absolutely mandatory. Now, with your Cadre Fireblade, is he someone that you're going to be chucking into the Devilfish, or is he going to be foot mounted?
So the idea was against armies that are very deep strike heavy, so GSC, demons, that sort of thing. He's backline, just sort of sit in my deployment zone, stop them deep striking in there, give me that area denial, and then against armies that don't have that capability, I can chuck him in a fish with the breaches and send him up the board. But it was sort of like it's more for the area denial, but if he doesn't need to be used for that, I want him to do what he does best. Okay, yeah, that's a good line of logic. So good line of logic with the Advanced EM Scrambler, which means that he's really great, and he's a prime target to put the Exemplar of the Cow Yun onto. Now, the other tech piece that we've seen with HQ slots is where people will put an Advanced EM Scrambler on a Crute Shaper, which is really, really good, but that HQ unit cannot take the redeploy because you need to be a Sept unit to be able to redeploy.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
So, and that's... I mean, the other...
Sorry, go.
Sorry, I was just going to say, the other reason that I hadn't gone with the Crute Shaper is just because, obviously, in those matchups where I'm not facing something deep strike shenanigans, it means I've got a dead unit. So I felt like the Cadre Fireblade might be a bit more versatile in that.
Yeah, it makes total sense. There we go. So no, 100% agree. It's a good line of logic. And you know, with the Crute Shaper as well, and it's, you know, the redeploys Warlord trait, my brain's all scrambled now. It can only go, is that just way too fucking bright? There we go. It can only go, like, you can only redeploy things that are non-sept. So if you're looking at like Crute Carnivores, Crute Hounds, that sort of thing, they cannot benefit from that Warlord trait ever. So you need to make sure that you put your stuff down in a position where they can pre-game move to safety without relying on picking them up and going from there. So Kadra Fireblade should be fine, and if I can, I would like to actually plug the Warlord trait in onto him. And I think the way that we do that is adjusting the Cold Star and the Crisis Battlesuit Commander. So I would probably say that if I had to make a choice and I had to keep one defensive relic on somebody, I would keep the Cold Star with the solid image projection unit. And the reason I say that is that he is more likely to put himself in a dangerous position than the Crisis Commander is, and that is because of the turn 1 redeploy. So if he's going to be picking up and potentially going to a section of the backfield where he's going to blow up a whole bunch of stuff that your opponent doesn't want you to blow up, if you've got the solid image projection unit, you actually have a chance of dicing out any, sort of slap back, and then making it so that the rest of the game is very, very uncomfortable for your opponent, as that commander that doesn't bracket, doesn't diminish, lives on like 1 wound. It's happened to plenty of people, and it's swung a lot of games. Now, where I would like to look on him is actually going from the missile pods and the Nova Surge and everything else, which in my opinion is making him a little bit too much expensive for not really as much output as he would want, to putting him onto something which will use the Master of the Killing Blow very, very, very effectively. So with the missile pods and the Nova Surge, you've got 5 shots. If we were to go something like a high output burst cannon, a burst cannon, and then, something else onto him, we start going to a large amount of volume where you're rolling more dice in the wound roll phase and potentially getting those 6s for AP3. Like, if you've got even, 3 of those going through on a set of flamers that you've got, that's 3 AP3 saves that somebody's got to make. And if you're looking at a unit, we don't need to think about purely wiping them out. But if you get onto, like, you have him going into Sisters or even Marines, 3 AP3s with a model that's got a built-in target lock onto, let's just say, basic Marines that are sitting in cover. They thought they were getting a 2-up, but instead they're getting a 6-up, which is pretty massive. And then you've just got volume of fire where you're like, cool, once you deal with those neg 3s, here is 20 other saves that you've got to make. And even if it's on a 2-up or it's on a 3-up, you're going to roll 1s and 2s eventually. So that's one area that I would like to take the Cold Star. And what that will do is give us a couple of points to work with further down the list. And it'll also, on the Crisis Commander, I think he is really well built out except for the target lock. I think that robbing him of a 4th weapon slot is probably something that's going to reduce his output to your detriment. Because ignoring that cover will not be better than chucking on, say, another cyclic from points that we've saved elsewhere and just going, cool, all of my other stuff isn't reducing, your save, but I'm still hitting you with another 3 AP2 shots, which, in my opinion is pretty value money. Especially because you've got him as your precision commander. He's re-rolling everything. There is a very, very, very good chance that all those shots get through. So that would be my first place to start. And I would also drop the Bagel Hunter plate off the Crisis Battlesuit. Just because I think that the CP is better spent with a redeploy trait rather than giving something that should be protected for most of the game, something that, makes them live just a little bit longer. Because in my experience, by the time people are on my commanders, either I've made a grave mistake or the game's already done. So Fireblade, let's go with him. Going to Exemplar of the Kaoyun. Your Cold Star, so we've got high output. I would probably end up going, just because he doesn't have access to Cyclics, which does suck a little bit, I would go Burst Cannon and then either Double Flamer or a Air Burst and Flamer. Now, the Air Burst, obviously, it's not going to be monstrous damage, but it does give you a little bit of over the wall if you think you're going into Eldar or whatever else. But when you can see somebody, this thing can actually do a decent amount of work. Because if we look at the profile of the Airburst, D6 shot, strength 4, AP 1, damage 1, blast. So really you've got a 24-inch similar profile to a flamer, but less shots overall because it's not D6 plus 2. With AP1 built into it. Now, if you're out of line of sight, that AP doesn't matter. They're getting a +1 to their save anyway, because you can't see them. And you're getting a reduction on your hit roll, but for commanders on a 3-up, that's not too bad anyway. There are plenty of Marines that do very, very well off that. So that would kind of be your choice, whether you prefer airbursting flamer, or just double flamers straight up. So that, when he does pop over somewhere, if somebody wants to countercharge him and they don't have the shooting to take him down, you go, cool, I'm going to be hitting you with 2d6 plus 4 shots. Guaranteed.
Okay.
So, yeah, that one's really a choice as to what you'd like to go. I'd probably say I've had a lot of success with the double flamer.
Well, that's the when I'm playing Borkan, I usually go high output, DWO2 and then Flamer to try and to make sure I proc the
Secret of Perfection. Yeah.
So that's what I'll probably do with it. I'll probably go Twin Flamer, but I might I'll have a play around with it.
So I'll leave that on there. And this was something that, as well, from my chat with Hayden Waldark, that and I've come around to that as well over the course of a couple of games. Output on commanders does feel pretty amazing. Just having a large volume of shots that I know are going to go through and put somebody onto a save. Because the plasmas and everything are great, but the time that I noticed the most value out of my plasmas really was when I had like crisis teams that had like double plasma, so I was firing 10 of them, which was a real problem for a lot of people. On its own, it's okay, cool, one dead model, but it's, if I go into Overwatch, rolling a 6 is kind of hard on one dice, and it's not something you really want to bank on. Okay.
No, it's the main. So what the main reason I went for missile pod, 2 missile pods and a plasma on that was to keep him more long range. So to keep him sort of out of the back, have him behind the crisis is to keep them moving, and then add a bit of long range support with higher AP, higher damage. But I think using him that way is going to be a bit better.
Yeah, and when I look at the way that you built the crisis suits as well, they are, and I'll bring that up from our other screen, they are particularly close range as well. So we look at the crisis suits, they have 2 of their 3 guns needing to be within 18 inches. So if we spec this in a way that, because you won't unmask your crisis suits until you're ready. They're not something that you throw out turn 1 or 2 for somebody to freely get shooting on. They are the piece that does a lot of uninteractable damage, where you're jumping over, you're firing and fading back over a wall, or firing and fading to the next set of terrain or whatever else. They're not something that we tend to just throw out in the open and go, cool, run at me. The stim injectors are there, usually in my list if shit hits the fan, I want to make sure that you're not doing the things that you want to do. But they're, not really a fail safe. So I think him going there is fine. I think with the Crisis Battlesuit Commander, because we have saved a couple of points, I would give him a 4th gun. So he was going on yours. Where is my list? Let me just get that on the off monitor. So he has triple cyclic.
Oh, shit.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. That's okay, mate. Double cyclic to start with. And then you had him with his last thing as the thermoneutronic, which is fantastic. So it's Tower Flamer. And then Thermo. Take him off the Bagel Hunter plate. Oh, wait, no, I removed that from him and I wasn't supposed to. Emergency dispensation, and you had the solid image projection unit. Though, if you're looking at your starting CP, I think the solid image projection unit, if you're not happy with just starting with the 1 CP and you prefer to start with 2 without an ethereal or whatever else in your list, I think that the solid image projection unit is probably the next thing that would be on the chopping block, which again would just force a playstyle shift from you. It's not something that's really going to damage you, but it is something which is optional. It has A place in that it can remove a save and it can give him a 4-up invulnerable natively. But if you find that, you're getting to the end of a lot of games and your commander's just living, just because of how you're playing, you can look at it and go, okay, well, look, maybe I don't need that just because of I'm having success without it, basically.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so cyclic. Flamer. So now we've got something to fill in for the last little bit here. Now, there are two ways that you can go on this. You could either look at moving the thermoneutronic projector onto the Cold Star, because it's still a great piece on him. And the reason I say that is that it means that if you chuck a burst cannon on this guy, you can chuck the DW02 onto him. And what that makes is a list where you've got two commanders that ignore Feel No Pains and ignore wound caps. So if they're rocking around with Gaz or a Bloodthirster or whatever else, you've got two very, very, very precision instruments that are able to just go, cool, if you stand out in the open, Crisis Suit's going to take you down to that cap, and then these commanders are going to hit you with everything, which can be very, very nasty. So that's a swap that you could look at making. Obviously, then that puts the Thermo onto a precision commander, which, could be fine. But it's really a choice of, like, if you don't have a lot of things that have Feel No Pains and wound caps within your local meta, then that particular tech piece might not get as much value. So this is more an assessment of what you find you're going up against very, very regularly. And the good thing is that I don't think it's that much of a swing of points that you really need to hyper plan in advance for this. So that would just be something that, if you feel you need it, chuck it in.
Okay.
But let's just look at, going the more expensive route if we were to chuck triple cyclic on him, because from my own personal experience running this on an Enforcer commander, this has been monstrous. Like, it is picked up almost anything it's looked at, which is just disgusting. All right, so the other boys we don't really need to do anything with. So that is the commanders set. So even then, we're looking at a Cold Star commander that we've dropped 50 points. We're looking at the Crisis commander that we've dropped by 5 points. And we've gained... We're at a net 0 at the moment with CP, but we've gained Exemplar of the Kaoyun, which for me is already kind of a win in playability of the list. Now, Double Breacher, Crew Carnival, we don't need to do anything there. We don't need to touch that. That's absolutely fine. The other thing, sorry, this is why it's so much cheaper. So the commanders, the Crisis Suit, having the double marker drones on is absolutely fine. The Cold Star is questionable. And the reason that I say that is that he is 14-inch move, they're 10-inch move. That immediately breaks coherency.
Yeah.
So I would actually say,
that was...
if you were to chuck the marker drones onto the Crisis team, you still get the same amount of value. They just take up a slightly larger footprint. And it means that you have a little bit more mortal wound protection in that unit. Because usually when I've got mortals coming in, markers are the first thing to take it.
Okay.
So that would be my recommendation there. Having said that, though, what else do we have that could take those drones? Because you don't have a ton of marker light support, though. In Fasted Enclaves, that gets mitigated a little bit by the time you have the rubber start hitting the road. You could also split it up so one goes on the Crisis team and you've got two on the Stealth Suit team. Though that one is less of a value play because usually Stealth Suits, you're not, because they're only a 3-man unit with 6 wounds, you're not really wanting to have them sitting out in the open. So, cool. So let's start looking at your Crisis Suit team. I don't think there's anything to change here, honestly. I think that the way that you built that out is how I would build that team. Potentially, I would think about dropping them to a 3-man, and this is for the reason that I'm about to go through. Your Stealth Suits don't have the homing beacon, which that as a flex play, similar to how you were talking before with your Cadre Fireblade, having flexibility where you can go, okay, cool, if I want, Crisis Suit start on the board because I know that I need the shooting from turn 1. I've either got an army that's going to rush me like a motherfucker, like Harlequins or whatever else, and I need those shots and I don't care about the additional footprint or whatever. Or you go, cool, they're going to start in Manta Strike, and if I deploy well or you deploy poorly, I'm going to bring them down turn 1. and be able to use the much, much better Farsight Enclave specific stratagem for full rerolls to hit and wound. Having a unit like that come down turn 1, and because you're starting with 1 CP, even if you go first, that is starting with 2 CP. Essentially, what you would do is just give up your combat debarkation from the breaches and the devilfish to go, cool, 2 CP, I'm going to slam you with literally everything and do very, very well at it. And that can be a really good Alpha Strike play because you have they won't have ignore any or all hit modifiers from the Crisis Suit commander, but that's fine. You just deploy in a way where he moves out to them where his guns are in range. The Cold Star commander moves out or does his redeploy. And then you've got Riptides with lines, you've got them with lines, and you've got a whole shitload of shooting that's coming through turn 1. Or you wait for turn 2 and it comes in with a bomber. And then you've got all of that shooting coming in as well. So that's why Homing Beacon, if I'm including a Stealth Suit team, I'm doing it for the Homing Beacon. The Stealth Suits don't actually bring too much value to me outside of that, unless I'm really worried about matchups where somebody is going to forward deploy in a way that's going to fuck me. So, for example, the biggest thing that comes to mind is when I'm looking at my Devilfish with almost any pre-game move, Votan, Marines, whatever else, you cannot end within a certain distance of most models. And that is almost across the board. I don't think there's any examples that don't pop up to me as having that rule. So if you
I think the only one is Lord Invocatus.
Yeah. So if you chuck something down, like you get the first deploy, and this is where sometimes I will take Defender purposefully, and then I put my Stealth Suit team down in a way that I'm like, cool, this is in front of where I know I want my Devilfish to move. So it requires a little bit of forward planning. But if I put them down there, I go, cool, you are not going to forward deploy in a way that denies my Devilfish their pre-game move. I will get the full 9 inches of it because our Devilfish can't land within 9 inches. So all they need to do is put them at the 15-inch mark and you go, cool, you get half of your pre-game move. And now you're not doing the things that you wanted to do. So that's a little bit of like forward planning sort of stuff at the real high end, but you can really mess up somebody's plan by doing that stuff. But most of the time, the Stealth Suits will take the Homing Beacon so that I can make a Manta play. And usually I won't take Stealth Suits without a Crisis Brick to benefit from it.
All right. Yeah, cool.
So Stealth Suits, nothing to change on them. Homing Beacon, giving them a marker drone is absolutely fine. It's actually nice having a little bit of drone support for them so that people have to commit maybe a little bit more than they would want to, because obviously natively they have the -1 to hit and the +1 to save whenever they're in cover. So they can be hard to shift, and if there's a drone sitting there as well, he gets the -1 to hit, and I don't think it gets the +1 to save, but I'd have to check that, because that'd be wild having a marker drone which is getting a 3-up armor save. Just ridiculous. But anyway, so Crisis Suit team, nothing really to change there. Let's just build them out so we can see our final points at the end. So Burst, Cyclic, Plasma. Nope, no, that was my number 2.
So on the, have just a thought on that then. If I was going to drop them down to a 3-man unit for that Alpha Strike potential, would it be worth then putting, say, Twin Cyclic Burst or Twin Cyclic Plasma on them to try and make them a bit more of a...
Can absolutely do that. Yeah, the amount of volume you would be throwing. Focused. Yeah, because if you were to look at... I would look at Twin Burst Cyclic or Twin Cyclic Burst. And the reason I say that is if you go on a 3-man double burst Cyclic... each model is shitting out, 12 shots from the burst cannons and 3 shots from the cyclics. So you've got 15 shots from each. That equates to 45 shots from a 3-man unit going out, and the potential to split fire on that as well. If you go the burst double cyclic, obviously you're forsaking a little bit of volume and you're going into a lot of very good AP2 damage 2 shooting on a unit which is likely, when it unloads the most, going to have full rerolls to hit and wound. Now, the other benefit of that is that if you go to a 3-man, the CP cost of the stratagem goes from 2 to 1. So it means in the same turn, you're able to combat debark as well as do your drop zone clear. So I actually ran after the first set of Crisis nerfs way back. I actually ran a 5-man that had my double plasma missile pod, which was great. And then I also ran another 5-man that had the double burst cyclic. And I actually, because of that unit, damn near clocked out because I had to roll so many goddamn dice. It worked. It was against a couple of armies that are lower in the meta at the moment. It was against one that's much higher in the meta, which was Iron Hands. It's really a case of, do you prefer the idea of having your opponent roll 1 billion dice on 2-up saves, or do you prefer to have them rolling less dice but they're on 4-up saves? Now, obviously, if you're going into a lot of things like Custodies or Terminators, the cyclics go up in value massively because you put them back onto their invuln, especially with your models that are firing with target locks. But yeah, that one's really a judgment call based on what you prefer. I think that still going burst cyclic plasma gives you the best mix of having this unit be a Swiss Army knife, which you look at everything else in your list, nothing else really Swiss Army knives in the same way. Your commanders are going to take care of any of your volume needs. The Riptides are going to do very good anti-vehicle, though I would consider dropping the SMS off the other Riptide, because while I'm happy to put out of line of sight onto commanders, having a Riptide at best hit on 4s, at worst hit on 6s, with out of line of sight stuff, you start losing a lot of value. Even though it's the twin SMS is 8 shots, right? It's been ages since I've used them.
Yeah.
But even still, 8 shots hitting on 5s and 6s means you get 2 or 3 of them through at best. Yeah. And then, and that's accounting for the terrible hit roll. And then, a decent wound roll, kind of. But, things will happen in the wound phase where, you will drop it because against most things you're going to be shooting, you got kind of 50-50 to get your wound roll through. And then they've got a +1 to their armor save. The -1 from the SMS isn't going to be enough to mitigate that. They're probably going to be in light cover. Yes, your Riptides have target locks, but at the end of the day, a Marine saving on 3s against some damage 1 stuff coming through, you're not making them go, oh shit, this is really going to fuck me up. You're thinking... Yeah, your opponent's thinking, cool, I'll weather this a little bit, and if I remove a model, I remove a model. Like, whatever. Whereas the plasmas give the Riptide more of the same role that the Ion is filling, but it allows you bad luck protection again. So if you're going into a vehicle, even if your Ion accelerator whiffs, as it has for me so many times, 4 out of its 6 shots or whatever, then you go, okay, cool, I'll throw the plasmas. If I get that through, that's an extra 3 damage that is going to take a vehicle that potentially lived but bracketed to proper dead. Or like bottom bracket, and if you don't have a way to make it top bracket, that vehicle is crippled for the rest of the game and I don't need to worry about it. So, yeah, Crisis Suits, I think keeping exactly the same is fine, just to fill that particular role that you can kind of go into anything with these guys and still do well. And that, for me, holds a lot of value. It's kind of why Crisis Suits, for me, aren't a dead unit with all of the point nerfs and everything that they've gotten over the years. Mostly just because they can fill a role where they do anything, and that has value.
So a question on that then. With using them more for that deep strike potential and more likely having them off the board to start the game, would it be better swapping the Crisis Commander to an Enforcer? Because they're less likely to be in the same area on the board for much of the time, or is it still worth having that Crisis for the times where it is on the same, where they do start in your deployment zone?
I think that one, again, is a judgment call. But given that we've been talking about a little bit of flexibility between Manta striking or not, having a Cadre Fireblade in the Devilfish or out of the Devilfish, I think that both the Crisis Commander and the Enforcer Commander both have a place and they both have value. I don't think that one stands head and shoulders above the other. It is just more and obviously this is really hard to sort of go through and know innately without knowing exactly how you play, how you make your moves, how you assess your opponent, doing all that sort of stuff. Also, your local meta can be a really, really big thing. If you're going to tournaments that really don't have a ton of dents, then the Crisis Commander can lose a bit of value unless you're going into a ton of Eldari, you're going into a ton of like armies that have ways to -1 to hit you, which admittedly there are a lot. And you know, having even in like vehicle heavy metas with you know, Dark Angels that spam a lot of vehicles, Iron Hands with a lot of their stuff that can pop smoke, the Crisis Commander does gain a lot of value there. It's just a question of what do you prefer? Because the Enforcer is slower, but it is a fantastic anchor. It means that wherever he is, even if you get charged, he is likely going to kill a lot of the stuff that comes in, and he's going to be really, really, really hard to remove. If you don't need an anchor, though, and you know, obviously him giving out OBSEC to the Crisis Suits is great. It's a little bit harder because with the Crisis Suits, if they're a 3-man, that's only 3 OBSEC models. That gets mitigated by having drones, because once you've got OBSEC on a point, it's no longer about who's got OBSEC. It's about how many models do you have if they have OBSEC as well. So if you've got drones, each individual drone counts as its own model for the purpose of controlling an objective. So, you know, even if they've got a 5-man Marine team and your 3-man's like, cool, I've got 5 OBSEC, you've got 3 OBSEC. You're like, yeah, cool, but what about these 4 drones following them around? I am actually a 7-man unit, so I control this objective. That, obviously, keep in mind, loses a lot of value as we go across the course of a game, because the drones will be the first thing to die. We do not want to take Crisis Suits first, yeah. So that is where the Enforcer gets his value, and OBSEC for me, like I run an Enforcer Commander in the same or very similar list to Hayden Walduck's Uprising list. And that one, I don't care about the Enforcer for the OBSEC. I literally want him as an anchor, because that's something I need in that list to win my games. If you don't need that, and I wasn't rocking a Crisis Suit team, so that's where I think the Crisis Battlesuit Commander goes up in value. He can follow them at the same speed. He has very, very good shooting himself, similar to the Enforcer. You will play him in a way where he will not take as many risks. Because the Enforcer, I'll put out in the open, and, you know, and not obviously at the start of the game when he's got all his resources, but when the battlefield's getting split up, and I'll have the Enforcer, I've had Custodes players just ignore him, because they're like, there's no way I'm going to kill him. So I'm going to go for the Riptide. I'm going to go for whatever, because they look at it and they're like, what's his defensive profile? And I start listing off everything. And they're like, oh man, fuck that. I'm going to go elsewhere. But that's, you know, when you've got the Crisis Commander, he's going to be surrounded by Crisis Suits, or he's going to be sitting with Breaches and the Devilfish or whatever else, because you just play them slightly differently. So that is a long-winded way of saying that there is no right answer, and really that comes down to you as a pilot. Got you.
Okay.
Cool. So
I'll have some games and see what way works best for me.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. Just take them into, like, if you've got mates that you can get rep games into, because obviously you're practicing for I want to say GT that's coming up.
Yeah, so I've got an RTT in 2 weeks, which is my first ever tournament, and then I've got the Warhammer Fest GT the following week.
Yeah, right. Okay. So if you've got anybody that you can get a rep game into, and rep games usually when I go into them, it will be looking at, you know, hey, let's just put everything down, even just play out the first 2 turns and then re-rack and go again. Because usually by the end of the first 2 turns, we know who's going to win. Obviously, that comes with experience and playing a lot of games. But even just having something where you can start making moves and getting it drilled into your head where your opponent goes, hey, by the way, if you do that, I'm going to do this. So just track that. Would you like to do something different? And then you get to see, okay, if I do that, I see the mistake. I see where I was going to get punished. If I go over here, though, I have an active example in my brain of this goes well because, and you've got that frame of why it went badly over the, you know, over the other decision. So if you can get anybody to do a rep game with you, talk out everything. Don't have a game where you're trying to, you know, play hard, you make a mistake, you stick with it, whatever, unless that's the way you learn. But if you can do that, play both sides of this list. Take in an Enforcer, take in a Crisis Commander, and just go, cool, hey, when we re-rack, I'm just going to change my list slightly. Doesn't change the points because you've already accounted for that. I'm going to put the Enforcer in. I want to see how he plays. I want to see if I like him.
Cool.
And honestly, across even the RTT, you'll get an idea by the end of it. You'll just sort of walk away from it being like, I feel like this didn't have the value I wanted because of this. And make sure that you're always framing it in terms of, look at what you could have done better as a pilot first, and then look at the models and the role that they filled and whatever else. Because usually if you take operator error out of it, you can then start to see where models have their inherent value. So we've got the 2 marker drones, the 2 shield drones on the crisis team. If we do go down to the 3-man, let's play that out as a thing. I think we will need to plug some more in there. I've done the 2 Riptides, Sun Sharks. I'll put the extra missile pods on there because why they don't come with 2 missile pods when it doesn't cost anything is beyond me. And then we've got the 2 Devilfish. So dropping the crisis to a 3-man obviously leaves open a 130-point hole. Now, this is where you get to the point of decision making. And I think the biggest thing will be you either maybe chuck in the 4th one and you take the CP hit, which, nullifies the turn 1 play of Manta with full rerolls and Devilfish combat debarking.
Mm-hmm.
Or you remove the Sun Shark and put in another crisis team. Because if you've got 2 3-man crisis teams, you've got one that's a good deep striker and you've got one that can start on the board. And then all of a sudden, you've got massive play potential with a Cold Star making them auto-advance 18, a crisis commander making them ignore the penalty for advancing and firing, marker light support, all that sort of stuff. You have a crisis team that can explode an enormous distance, especially with Exemplar of the Cow Yuan. You can deploy them very conservatively. And then if you go first and you know you're going for that turn 1 play, put them up on the line with a redeploy with their 2 commanders and go, cool, we are going to rush and I'm going to get the angles that I want. So that's an area that we can go to, but it depends what you're looking at with the Sun Shark Bomber. Because obviously since their double nerf, the Sun Shark's lost a lot of value. But yeah, what's your thinking there?
So my thinking with the Sun Shark, it was sort of twofold. So I like it as a second light, sort of a second wave in a Monte Carlo style game, where it's that second, it sort of comes in turn 2, middle of the board, and then just shoots something that they're trying to keep from the rest of where I'm putting my army.
Yep.
Because when the games I've had with it, I've found that it shoots just as hard as the crisis team.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So it's even if I'm not getting that. Quite the same support as I'm getting with the crisis team with the commanders. It's still, the other part of it is that it's a really good distraction Carnifex. It's a great thing to bring in for 165 points, shoot the hell out of a unit or something big, because obviously it's a lot of AP2 2 damage shots.
Yep.
And then for that next round, they're focusing on that. So it's been. I'm less as well with a crisis suit unit. It feels very bad when you lose it. Whereas with this, it feels like if you bring it in and get 1 round of shooting out of it, and then suddenly they're shooting all of their big shooting at it instead of say a Riptide or the crisis unit, because they think, oh, it's up there, it's easy, it's an easy target. It tends to work out quite nicely that way. So
okay.
So how I've been running it is mostly in Borkan, where it's still got that added, any lower shots are less strength, and it's harder to hit. So the last game I played with it against Guard, it actually took 2 full rounds of shooting and it didn't die. So
lucky man.
So hilariously, obviously you were saying about how you'd had a terrible time with the Ghost Keel. My Ghost Kill in my last game had 2 rounds of shooting from Gatekeeper and survived, and then killed the Gatekeeper commander in 1 round of shooting. So
that is nuts. That is nuts. So knowing that, the other way that I would get you to look, if we've got the Sun Shark, we can plug something in for 130 points. It might be, and this will depend on what you own, so we'll go through that in a little bit. But what I also wanted you to look at, if we do go away from the Sun Shark, and we go, okay, cool, bang, bang, 2 hammerheads. fit in because we've reduced the crisis from there. Now, 2 hammerheads is fantastic. All we have to do is just change your troops to heavy support, and bing, bang, boom, we've got that. We come out at 1995 points. So that is an option that you can look at going, and 2 rail guns for the price of that Sunshark and 1 crisis model is and gaining the homing beacon is essentially what we've gained. And then on one of those to fill out the last 5 points, you just chuck a seeker missile on him because why not? It's extra anti-tank. So that is an option that we can look at. Now that's dropping 2 marker drones from the Cold Star Commander to achieve that, 1 crisis model, and a Sunshark. So that is an area that we can look at going. The other area that you can look at, if we were to get rid of the Hammerhead, we keep the Sunshark Bomber in. Now, of this list, obviously, you know all the stuff that you own. What else do we have that we could potentially plug in to fill 130 points if we weren't to go the Hammerhead route?
So I've got... so I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I haven't got... I'm not great without having it in front of me. I've got a few broadsides. I've got obviously a ghost kill. Well, I've got 2 ghost kills with different weapons. I've got a shed load of strike teams. I've got more, another unit of breachers, another unit of Kroot carnivores, but no Kroot hounds.
Do you have a 3rd devilfish?
I don't, but I'm trying to get hold of one.
Okay, all right.
I'm just a bit strapped for money at the moment.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. So off
that was the other thing I was I'm wanting to run. I was the potential of running a 3rd devilfish. Oh, I've also got Pathfinders.
Pathfinders could be really, really good. Now, if we look at Pathfinders, I have come to love them quite a lot. I have seen that there are a lot of people that mistake their function within a list. Now, if you have the capacity to do it, I loved Hayden's tech of giving them 3 rail rifles, first and foremost.
That's how I usually run them. So the two teams of them that I have modelled, one is with 3 rail rifles, which is how I usually run them, and the other is with 1 rail, 1 cyclic, and that's more for kill team, but I do occasionally use them if I've short points.
So the way that he set these up, these are incredible because the tech piece that we use for this, you can either have them in a devilfish so that they go out. If you want to get a long range aerospace targeting relay turn 1, they actually get out of a devilfish further than a breacher squad does. So what you're looking at, and this is where I'll get into after this, your homework after we do this session is going to be go and watch my Kroot Hound video, go and watch my devilfish video, because that has a lot of on the table tips and little tech pieces that we use. But they get out 3 and then the drones move 10, whereas the Pathfinders move 7. So you've got them with, and I go through this in the Devilfish video, but the Devilfish pre-game moves 9 inches, moves 12 inches, which is 21. They get out 3, then move 10. So you've then added 14 inches to the 21 inches, making it 35 inches total. That is more than half the board, and there are almost no deployments that will mean that something going 35 inches cannot get to the edge of the board. And then they just do an aerospace turn 1 because Pathfinders have the Fire Warrior keyword, and in the thing they complete it at the end of the turn. It means that you're throwing a Pathfinder team in a Devilfish unit, but if you go, okay, cool, my Crisis team are doing the back one, 2 breaches are doing the side ones, and my Pathfinder team's doing the back one, turn 1, I have decisive action because I control half or more of the objectives on the board. I put up a 15 for aerospace targeting relays, and then next turn, if you don't do anything about it, I'm going to get a 12 for primary. You go, cool, I've just jumped out to a near 30-point lead turn 2. Have fun catching up to me.
Yeah, I might have to try that.
Now, you won't do it with everybody because there are some armies that go, cool, you've just thrown out all your stuff. I have the capacity to kill them. You've just thrown the game. So you won't do it against everybody, but there are a lot of armies that will struggle to come back from that. Moreover, you'll be using your Devilfish and your Breaches in a way that will move block people quite heavily because the Devilfish doesn't have to go where the Breaches are. You can pre-game move them and then have the Breaches get out laterally and go to the edge of the board. Whereas the Devilfish is standing in front of it because nobody can move within 1 inch of you if you've got models that don't have breachable or aren't infantry or beasts or swarms, and you position around terrain, they then have to go a long way and potentially can't get to objectives. So even though that Devilfish will die, and maybe the Breaches do and the Pathfinders and whatever, turn 1, you have just put down so much. With, then again, a Sunshark to come in. You've got stealth battlesuits that can go out places. You've got a crisis team. You've got the Kroot Carnivores, which are pre-game moved and then can go out and take another one. You've got everything you need for 3 solid turns of scoring, which sometimes can be enough just to win a game outright. So that's your homework. And that's why the Pathfinder team, I actually stand behind quite a lot. Now, we do have to find 10 points for that. So that, in my mind, would just be dropping the marker drone off the Stealth Suit team. They don't especially need it anyway. Farsight Enclaves means that a lot of your stuff is going to be getting markers within 9 inches anyway. And yeah, here we have a functional list. The commanders are as killy as they need to be. You've got the Advanced EM Scrambler and Exemplar of the Cao Yun. You have a ton of flexibility with Manta Strike turn 1s, with the Cadre Fireblade being able to jump in and join a Breach Squad for exploding 6s or stay on the board. You've got your Sunshark for later in the game to put a bit of pressure down there. And you've got a Pathfinder team that even if you don't, and this was the other thing that I don't know if I've mentioned in any of the videos, Pathfinder teams look at the stratagem Recon Sweep. You get to move them.
I use that one quite a lot.
Yep. Fire your Marker Lights, then make a normal move, and you fire the Marker Lights on 2s, which is insane. So
I like using that one to jump them back into a Devilfish.
Yep. Love doing that. There's a lot of people that don't realize you can do that, but because of the embarkation and debarkation rules, you're actually re-embarking at the start of a new phase. It's the same thing I was doing when I first started out with my my Grey Knights interceptors in and out of a Rhino. And my opponent fucking hated me because he wanted to kill this 10-man interceptor unit that just kept getting in and out of a Rhino and just being like, cool, you can't touch me. What's up?
Yeah. Well, that was one I think I saw that from either one. I think it was from one of your videos, and I was just like, "Oh, that's hilarious!" And I did it in my last game again. In the game I had against Guard, they had mortars, and they kept trying to shoot my. They wanted to shoot my Pathfinders, but they were in my Devilfish. I was just like, jump them back in. Nope, you can't do anything. And
mortars bounce off them, especially if you're in Borkan. Those mortars then going to wounding on 6s. Most I actually had in the Mutually Assured Destruction I'm editing at the moment with one of the best Guard players in New South Wales. I had him down here and we played a game off stream. And he got to the point where he had 2 sets of mortars and all he could shoot at was a Riptide and Devilfish. He's like, my turn's over, man. Like, just that's it. I'm not even going to bother. The dice are so far against me, I'm not even going to bother. Like, your Devilfish is going to be saving on 2s. What's the point? So, yeah. But yeah, so this, I think, is a very functional list. Still comes into 2,000 points. Don't forget that if you get 2 hammerheads, I also very heavily stand behind those. 2 railguns is something that people will have to play hard against. We are in a very, Terminator and vehicle heavy meta, and the railgun, not only taking away their invulnerable save, will kill 2 Terminators straight up. Because you kill one with the first shot, and then 3 mortal wounds go through. There are very few things that have 3 mortal protection against 3 mortal wounds. So, in that respect, so if I didn't want to move other things around, so the way I've got it, so the list as written now is obviously Cadre Fireblade, Cold Star, Crisis, Breaches, Crew, 3 Crisis with 2 Marker and 2 Shield, Stealth Suits, Pathfinders with 2 drone. Well, I've got them with a drone at the moment, but it'll be 2 drones. And then
two Riptides, Sun Shark, Devilfish.
Yep.
Would it be worth dropping one of the Riptides to get a Hammerhead in, and then using the extra 100 points for maybe another carnivore team?
In my opinion, no. You can go to one Riptide, but the reason why I'm fine with dropping, like a Sun Shark for two Hammerheads, or would it be Sun Shark and the Pathfinders now that we've gone down that route? The reason I'm okay with that is that the Riptides fill a very, very special role, and it was something that took me a little while to come around to because I was coming off the very precise vertical buff stacking Crisis unit that I adored pre-nerf. And then the Riptides, because they're not as precise, they're not as good at just being a scalpel, basically, for whatever I pointed it at. That's not particularly their role, but what they do very, very well is fill a very, very varied role of, because they've got move, shoot, move. They can sit on the back. 72-inch guns with 30-inch plasmas mean that you're touching almost anything you want to, plinking off wounds and then keeping them very, very safe, which your opponents have to play around. Even though they're not something that's just going to obliterate whatever they touch, your opponents have to play around them. And then towards, the turn 3 onwards or whatever, particularly if you're facilitating plays where, like we were talking about, your breaches go out and, get every single aerospace turn 1 with your Pathfinders doing the furthest one. If you lose them, you've then got these big 2-up, 4-up brick units that can stand on objectives and go, cool, I have a 5-up feel no pain against all damage. So even if I don't succeed on my saves, there's a potential that I just feel no pain at all off. And because I'm 14 wounds, I'm good to go to stand on these objectives, still shoot well, still do everything else. So they then fill the role that once you've spent resources to score very, very, very effectively, and you've got commanders in the center and whatever else, you've got Riptides on your backfield objectives or one backfield objective with another Riptide going further up. You have waves of pressure where the first ones are pressure based on speed. Everything behind it is pressure because they are surprisingly resilient when they want to be, or have the tools to shoot something, jump over a wall, still stand on the objective, but still utilize obscuring terrain in a very, very obnoxious way. So that's why in a list like this, I think the two Riptides you want to have, because the Sun Shark is guaranteed starting off the board. For your good scoring, you're having to expend resources to do it. Or if you're wanting to, the Hammerhead, once you unmask your Hammerhead, there's no way to remask it. And when I talk masking, sorry, it's a holdover from my military time. Whenever you had guns and aircraft, when you unmask your guns and you unmask your aircraft, that is a commander making that decision. So we would never do it until we were ready and we were sure that we were not going to immediately lose that resource for no reason if it got counter battery fire or anti-aircraft fire or whatever else. A Hammerhead, when you unmask it, unless you kill your target and you have, mitigated every other lane of fire, there is a good chance that Hammerhead is dying in return. So if that Hammerhead shot fails, you have then lost that resource for nothing. Because, even on a 3-up with a built-in reroll, Hammerheads do fail, which kind of sucks, but we can't get away from it. So that's where I'm fine with losing a Sun Shark and a Pathfinder team for two Hammerheads, because that is double resource that even if you lose one, you've still got another one on the board. You can strat reserves and have a Hammerhead just plonk in on the side of the board and go, cool, railgun shot that you can't do anything about. You couldn't remove this resource because we got 3 strat reserves in Arcs of Omen. I'm okay with making that decision and recommending that decision. And that's the other thing. When I'm building a list with somebody, I'm always doing it from the lens of, would I be comfortable playing this? Like, am I recommending something that I would happily take to a GT? Happy to do it there, but not at the expense of a Riptide with what's left in this list, because everything has to fill a role. Yeah. So that's my line of thinking.
Yeah, because the Riptides are the durable part of that. I get that.
And they're not designed to be. They will add to your turn 1 alpha strike if you've got angles for them, and then just move back into cover so there's no retaliation whatsoever. But then they also can, they're not part of that alpha strike as a key component. They are just additive. They are a force multiplier, not the base value. So yeah. So that's what I'm looking. And with this list, obviously we've seen that there's a lot of room that you can move the commanders around. There, you do have the option of going back up to a 4-man crisis team if you like that idea and you don't mind the extra CP cost. And obviously you've played around with other seps. If you wanted to, you can just take out this Cadre Fireblade, find the points elsewhere and chuck an Ethereal in, and then you don't have to worry about your CP because you're getting 2 CP each of your turns. So, yeah. But at the moment, functionally, this list, while the Sunshark is a bold play, and I hope it works out for him, Cotton, if you're familiar with that quote,
yes.
I am still confident that I would be able to take this to a tournament and at least go X and 1. If I go into some of the best players in Australia, they would be able to pick it apart, but I don't think that's a criticism of the list particularly. I think that's just how it goes when you go against some of the best players. So, yeah. But I think you'll have a lot of fun with this list, honestly.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much. Yeah. That's it's definitely helped me. There's a few things that I wasn't sort of like. I think I'm still very much in that. Let's just try and kill everything. I'm still working into the. Oh yeah, I need to do secondaries. So that's definitely something that's helped me there and given me a bit more perspective on where I can go with this list and how to sort of work around it. Yeah, because there was a few things in there that I've added because of the videos from before. So like with the Crew Hounds video about the screening and needing something there to operate in that role, there was a lot of time where I just wasn't doing that. So adding them in and then working around how each other aspect will help me get to those points is it's definitely
Now, another thing that I'm going to load onto you for homework is watch the interview that I had with Hayden Waldock, because there's a particular part. Well, there's a couple of parts of that. The man's a freaking genius, but there is a part of that video where he's talking about the Pathfinder team, particularly out of a Devilfish, where he is just using them to such an obnoxious sort of goal, where a Pathfinder team can get out of the Devilfish, do their move, they can then recon sweep to move 7 again, and then they can charge a unit. So you have some lowly, like, you know, a set of Lehman Russes or something at the back, which is like, nobody's going to want to charge that. You put Pathfinders into them, and yes, they can turret fire out, but if they're obscured behind a building and they're not moving, like, what does it matter? You've just tied up 2 Lehman Russes for the entire fucking game. And yeah, so don't forget that, like, so that is the homework, is rewatch the Crude Hound video, Devilfish video, watch the interview with Hayden Waldock, because there is some absolute fucking gems of knowledge that he dropped out of that. Now, for your scoring plan, which is the last thing that we'll do as part of the list repair stuff, decisive action will be an auto take every single game, without question. Aerospace will be a 95% auto take, because you're spec'd into it, you're able to achieve it almost every single time. Obviously, you've got a unit of breaches that are out in the open, and if you end up picking up a 3rd Devilfish, I would highly, highly, highly recommend finding a way to plug it in. Off the top of my head, I would drop a Carnivore squad, and I'll potentially drop the Stealth Suit squad. If you're not willing to part with the Sunshark, because obviously that's a really easy way just to get it in. But 95 points, you might not even, no, you wouldn't need to drop both. You'd look at probably the Carnivores and then finding the points somewhere else, maybe making the Crisis Commander less expensive. But you can cross that bridge when you get to it, and I'm more than happy to help you out with making that switch after, because the 3 Devilfish units will just give you so much flexibility in terms of Alpha Strike, chucking breaches and Pathfinders, shooting into people's faces behind walls. That's how I've won against Guard. I have a 100% win rate against Guard, and there's a reason for it, that I always target their infantry. I ignore their tanks. And I throw all of these dudes, where a breacher squad will pick up a unit of Kazakin, they'll pick up a mortar squad, they'll pick up whatever. And if you've got commanders, you've got crisis suits coming down, you've got whatever else. If you get rid of that, Inflexible Command becomes very, very hard to score, and Boots on the Ground becomes impossible. You're making 2 of their secondaries at best take a 5. So, excuse me. That can be very powerful. Your 3rd one is the flexible slot, where just take whatever kills secondary will give you the most points reliably. So let's bring it down. There's no prisoners. be careful of Assassinate. Assassinate, in my opinion, is generally always a trap, except...
Yeah, I tend to avoid Assassinate where possible.
With the exception of armies that need to use their characters to win the game. So standouts for me are things like Harlequins, are things like Eldari if they've got a ton of character units and don't get caught out by Warlocks. I'm pretty sure the Warlock units don't actually count as a character unit. But things where if they're taking stuff like Warp Ritual, they need to be in the center of the board to affect that. And once you start getting rid of some of their other units, the characters are all that's left to do damage or hold objectives or whatever else. Be careful against things like Sisters. Sisters can hide their characters all day. They will never have to expose them once. So that, even though they'll give you like a 21 against them, that is a bait. Do not do it. Fallback is always grind them down, but you need to make sure that you are able to effectively do that and also don't get caught out by killing too quickly. Because if you table your opponent too quickly or you're confident that you will, grind becomes impossible because then nobody's killing anything for the rest of the game and all of a sudden you're done. It's also the reason why I never recommend people take clean victory. Because if you kill people too quickly, especially against rush armies where you have to, you then lose based on points thereafter. But that one can have value because you're going to be picking Montcar almost every single game with this list because Cao Yun, you do not want to give up that sort of board priority. You do not have the resources to sit back and allow them to do whatever they want, then try and get it back in the last 3 turns of the game. And also from the perspective that it's a bad idea because it's your first couple of tournaments, clocking out is a genuine worry for you. So you want to make sure you've scored 1 billion points, turn 1, 2, 3, so that if the clock runs out or you're against a slow opponent or you're whatever, you are still good. You still have plenty of points and you don't have to worry. That's a mistake that I wish somebody had corrected for me when I first started playing because Cao Yun started to become the predominant thing and I was still learning to be faster in a tournament setting.
Yeah.
So yep.
Sorry, just on that point then, what sort of games would you recommend using Cao Yun with this list?
Cao Yun, I would only recommend if you are 1, going second, and 2, need to give up board priority because you weren't going to be able to take it anyway. Now, this one becomes... I know that doesn't help you as a player that's going into your first tournaments, but that is the line of logic that you need to have in your brain that Montcar is better because the pre-game moves on the Devilfish, as well as pre-game moves from the Carnivores, means you can stage very well. Staging is where you are just off a place you need to be because you need to be there next turn. And your opponent knows that if they move there, it's very, very prominent in charging-based armies like World Eaters. They have to stage not for that turn, but because the next turn they need to be in range to get their charges. So that's why it's good for charging, but Cao Yun... against something like, let's say GSC, where they've got half of their stuff off the board and they've got the capacity to, when the game starts, take another quarter of it off the board with blips. You know that if you go hyper-aggressive against a good GSC player, he's just going to start coming in from every other angle and you're not going to be able to stop him showing up within 3 inches on an objective or whatever. And you go, okay, cool. I'm going to make it because you have to come in by turn 3. Then I can explode out, take decisive action, do everything else, start getting my kills, start whatever. That would be a scenario where I would consider it because I know that GSC player isn't going to be putting exhaustive pressure on me early. He is giving up the board, so therefore I can as well to then start getting my points towards the end of the game. And because you guys are going to be uninteractive, turn 1, 2, 3 is going to be super fucking quick. Because all that's going to happen is a couple of units going to pop up, a little bit of shooting, a little bit of saves, but then you're done because there's not much on the board. And then that also means you're saving your Sunshark to come in for the perfect counterpunch. And if you're going second in that thing, he has to have all of his stuff on the board before you do with your turn 3. You've got the advanced EM scrambler to fuck him, that sort of thing. So go off that line of logic. If you know that he has to give up board priority as well, Cao Yun gets massive value because you're not going to be able to use Montcar, although there is still a world where I would still rip Montcar there because I'm like, okay, cool, you give up board priority. I'm scoring 20, then 30, then 50, then whatever. That for me is still a net win because he's behind and he's chasing me. So it's a judgment call. And this is where I would play it in rep games. Have played in an environment where it doesn't matter if you lose as a result of doing it, but you get the experience to go, because I can tell you all day, and that's fine, but it's different when you walk away from the game and you're like, oh, I get it. Like there's something about experience connecting the dots. And I would highly recommend getting that. And honestly, for your tournaments, don't be afraid to fail. Like, I have had some crushing defeats, but I've walked away from it going, I understand perfectly what I did wrong, and that will never happen again. And that is such value.
Well, my aim for these two, for the RTT and for the grand tournament, is to win one game.
Yep.
I want to win one game at each event, and that if I do that, I'll be happy.
Excellent.
And then after that, I just want to enjoy the games. But it was more like, if I can get to that point, if I can win a game, and I can understand what I'm doing wrong in the games that I'm not winning, that's when I'll be happy. But there's definitely a few things now. Like, I've been trying to use Calyon a lot more recently because obviously there's a lot of shift in that in the meta.
Yep.
So going back to Montcar, I think I'll be more comfortable with, because that's what I've used predominantly anyway. But having that bit more information now as to how I can use that more effectively, rather than just be, I'm just going to run up the board and shoot you.
Yep.
So,
okay. Now, just because we'll close off here, but I will, and this isn't normally part of the list repair stuff, but it's a freebie anyway, so what the hell. A couple of tournament tips for you. Make sure that you're doing everything by intent, and what I mean by that is that you are saying out loud your intention for everything that you're doing. And even if you're not normally a big talker, this avoids so many problems where if you put a unit out and you're like, okay, I'm putting these guys down, I want to be off the wall, so I'm not touching, but still on this objective. Then if there's any bumps, if there's anything else, your opponent heard you say, I want to be off the wall, so he can't be like, no, you're touching, I can shoot you. And when you start going through that, you'll actually notice that a lot of other people that might not be communicators open up a little bit more when somebody else communicates with them quite heavily. And it means that you have incredibly amicable games. Don't get me wrong, you're going to find your dick bags, and there's no way getting around that. But you will have more amicable games, because when you give somebody something like that, there is this reciprocity where they go, okay, cool, he's doing it, so I'm going to do it too. And he's being upfront and open and whatever else. And it also means that when you make a mistake, because you're stating everything out loud, they go, you know what, everything you've been saying tracks, everything you've been saying, I'm happy to acknowledge that that is an honest mistake. That's fine. It's not like you've been trying to sneak stuff around, you haven't been talking to me and whatever else. So speaking out loud throughout the entire course of your game has massive, massive value that you can't exactly track statistically. Make sure you're asking your opponent as many questions as you can. Pre-game, you want to be looking at what of yours can advance and charge? What of yours can advance and shoot? Do you have any same turn redeploys? What are the predominant stratagems that you will use every single game that I need to be aware of? And whenever you're about to move a model, make sure that you're looking at whatever can counterpunch it, whatever can take that objective from you, things that your opponent can do. Even like sometimes I'll be like, oh, sorry, real quick, how far can this unit move? If my intent is to move this guy out here, are they in range that they could get on top of my face? Because a lot of, and this is at the high-end tables I've noticed, so me and my opponent will actually kind of talk out almost like a chess match where we're playing together, and then we'll go, okay, cool, yeah, no, if you make that decision, I can't do anything about it. That's great play. And you won't get that with everybody, but I find that then you don't have instances where people feel bad after something happens, because it's not a gotcha, it's not a whatever, and it's not like I play my opponent's game for me. But if I see that they have the presence of mind to go, hey, I'm looking at your crisis team there, can they actually get at this unit if I put them in this building? I will measure up and be like, okay, well, my movement is 18 inches, because he would know that next turn anyway. And I go, so if I'm here, you need to have your bases forward of this. If you have the movement to do it, then you can do it. If you can't, then you can't. I'll be able to shoot you, and that's a choice you make. And that means that I have so many more amicable games, because people know that if they lose, they lost because I made better decisions, or the dice said so, or they made mistakes or whatever else, not because they went out somewhere and I'm like, aha, cool, I've got a strat and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and whatever else.
I always try and play like that anyway.
Yep.
So I despise gotcha moments. So I'm like, I will try and give my opponent as much information as I can and try and get as much as I can from them anyway.
Yep.
Because it's more fun for everyone if when you play it like that, I find.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm salty when those kind of things happen.
The other thing that I want to express onto you is do not be afraid to call the TO. And it doesn't have to be that there's some massive argument or whatever, but if somebody goes, oh, I don't think you can do that, and in your mind you're like, well, I'm fairly certain that I can. If you pull out a rule book and you can't work out something or whatever, or even if like the rule that I take is from observing, I got to make the plays like Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic the Gathering and whatever else. In any of his tournaments, if a disagreement is going to take longer than 30 seconds to resolve, they call a TO immediately. And it's like, it's built into the community that is the done thing. That is an acceptable thing for them to do. So if, the way that I do it is if somebody's like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, look, I am 100% that I can do this. Even if the wording's a little bit whatever, I'll go, hey man, let's just grab the TO. He can make a decision on it, then we go forward. Like, no harm, no foul. And, you know, we walk off, we grab the TO, they make a decision, we go, yep, cool, no problem. Then we go back there. If you start making it like that, one, you identify that if somebody doesn't want to grab a TO, that is an immediate red flag and you should go grab a TO immediately. And if they know that you are willing to go and get the TO involved, not in a shitty way, but in a, I'm willing to use him as a third party. If you turn around and say, look, 100%, I know that this is the rule, and you're willing to back yourself and you know that you're right, they know that if you're willing to have a third party come and check your work and you're saying that you're 100% certain, they will be more likely to go, okay, cool, look, you're the Tau player, happy to go like that. And if it turns out later, I always, like if I was in the wrong and there was a small wording mistake or whatever else, I'll actually go and find my opponent and just be like, hey, look, we played the rule this way. I actually found out from him that there's blah, 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 blah. Just want to let you know, whatever. But yeah, always go and grab a TO if something's going to take longer than 30 seconds to resolve. Obviously, always pull out the book first and look through the rule and show him and whatever. But yeah. That is just something that I've had some less than pleasant experiences at tournaments. I probably had, in my first year of Warhammer, I probably had the most bad luck that I'd seen from my local tournament, including like having a dude like follow me to my car because he couldn't understand the difference between within and wholly within, and I tried to explain it to him. Yeah, it wasn't a great year. So, but if you start incorporating the TO, it means you've got other people that are seeing what's going on, and it's no longer a he said, she said. It is, backed up by other people knowing what's going on. So, yeah. But obviously, don't let that doom and gloom on it. There was really, really bad luck. Most people you'll play will be fantastic people.
So what my thing is, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So, like, I played somebody quite recently who I'd been warned that they are a bit of a if there's a rule that's conspicuous, they'll try and like put it on things.
Yeah.
So I was I went into that game being like, right, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but anytime that I smell a rat, I'm going to call it. And it was okay. Like, for the most part, it was fine. And the guy was actually quite pleasant. It was just there was a couple of things where I had to go, oh, are you sure about that? And they was like, oh, right, oh yeah, sorry, shift that back and a few things. Yeah. But I'm there to have fun. I'm in the hobby to have fun. So I want to win because there's a certain level of competitiveness, but at the same time, I'm not going to be a dick about it.
Well, that's the thing that I look at, and that's why I encourage people to go to a TO and whatever else, because it removes any of the dickishness when we as a community go, okay, cool, we can't agree, third party. Like, that immediately just removes any emotion, it removes whatever. Somebody else can make the call and we can get back to rolling dice. So, but that's the end of our list repair, man. So you've got your homework. Awesome. Make sure you go and do that. But in the lead up to it, any questions, man, hit us up. Obviously, hit up any of the boys in the Discord as well.
Awesome.
But best luck with your tournament.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. There's definitely a lot of things that I'm really excited about trying out now. So I'm gonna play around with that and see what we can do.
All right, mate. Fantastic. Well, all the best, and yeah, we'll see you around the Discord.
Cheers, Jay.
All right, cheers.
Bye bye.
All right, so for anybody that is watching now, that's obviously the end of our list repair session. I hope you guys got something out of it. I know that I did, and yeah, we're doing these all the time within the Pandin Studios Discord. So if you'd like to join us, there is for the people on YouTube, there's a link down in the description. For anybody on Twitch at the moment, it is I don't think I can put that in a Twitch description. I might just chuck a chat message in. So if you'd like to follow that and get yourself some awesome shit, I'll chuck that in before I end the stream. But that will be the end of our stream now. I need to go and enjoy myself some Path of Exile, which, I mean, shit, I might end up streaming as well. So make sure you got notifications on for when we go back live. Cheers, everyone.